Hi, everyone. It's great to hear the buzz in the hall this morning. It's a nice, lovely Sunday, and we noticed that there was no traffic on the way to the museum this morning, which is a great sign. Less people are in the mall. Uh, Welcome, all of you, to the 16th JANAL Lecture. It's nice to see some new faces here today as well. So I think let's hope we have a fruitful session. Stay on for the Q&A, and let's have a good discussion. The Kerala Museum, with the support of the Geojit Foundation, launched the JANAL Digital Archives program last year to mark the 35th anniversary of the museum. The initiative pays homage to the museum's creator, the founder, R. Madhavan Nair, and his lasting dream to bring history within the reach of all. He conceived the museum as a cultural haven devoted to immersive learning experiences in the arts. And not just fine art, but in the arts as well. But little would he have imagined that we would go digital the way we have today with our collection on Google Arts and this program now reaching a point where we can release our articles and our exhibitions online to people. Next week, we'll be sending out to you all links of the JANAL Archives website, and we hope that you all will read and give us feedback on the articles. I know many of you all are involved in writing and publishing and bringing out chronicles for many years now in Cochin as well. So please do give us your feedback. We'd be very grateful. The JANAL Digital Archives uncovers Kerala's lesser-known stories in the sense we look at micro-histories and then open it up for wider audiences to be able to understand what's happening with history there. And we don't look at history just as history, we look at it as an intersectional, in an intersectional way so that it's crossed with cultural, with social, with political, with, as many environmental as well. Which means that we do have a wide range of speakers and lecturers coming in for our JANAL Talks series. And the JANAL Talks was conceived actually by our sponsor, Geojit, CJ George, who said that, researching is all fine, but if we want a space where we have a vibrant discussion and you bring in community to talk about these things, then you have to have the live sessions continuing. And going digital is obviously not the only thing that we want to do. We want to, of course, have everyone here to discuss things, just like before COVID. So one of the things we focused on, simultaneous to writing the articles and researching for them, is putting together this JANAL Talks lecture series, and it's come out to be quite a vibrant collection of lectures that people are using as resource across the globe now. So today's lecture is broader theme, but sets the context for much of the discussions that we engage in on our online exhibitions. So it's also very important for us to look at what is a museum, why is a museum doing what it's doing today, what kind of history are we looking at today, can we redefine the ways we look at history. All of these are now we'll start unpacking these areas over the next few lectures. And not only just specific areas of research like we did in the previous set of lectures. Today we are privileged to have with us Professor Aditya Mukherjee, and he'll be speaking on the topic of the use and abuse of history, very relevant today. Professor Aditya Mukherjee, who's General President of the Indian History Congress, has served as a professor on contemporary Indian history at the Center for Historical Studies at JNU for over 4 decades. He chaired the Center for Historical Studies and directed the Jawaharlal Nehru Institute of Advanced Study at JNU. Notably, he contributed to the Indian History Congress, serving as its president in 2007 and becoming the General President-elect in 2022. Internationally, Professor Mukherjee earned prestigious fellowships and collaborated with institutions globally. His editorial roles in publications like the SAGE series in Modern Indian History and the International Review of Sociology have had an impact on historical discourse. A prolific author, He co-authored influential books like India's Struggle for Independence and Imperialism, Nationalism, and the Making of the Indian Capitalist Class, 1927-1947, contributing significantly to scholarship and offering nuanced perspectives of India's historical narrative. Also, today in the lecture, he will be unpacking some of those topics for us while he speaks on the use and abuse of history. We'll also be looking at what is contemporary history and why some of the things we can continue from yesterday and from previous discussions we have had at JANAL Talks. We are so happy to have you here today with us, sir. Please come take the podium.
Thank you very much, Aditi. I must, to begin with, thank the organizers of the Kerala Museum, particularly particularly the director, Aditi Zakarias, for this opportunity to come here and interact with all of you. Janal, I learned on the way to coming here, means a window. And in Bangla, the other language that I speak, Janala is also the window. So what the Kerala Museum does very well, clearly, is open the windows into Kerala, as well as open out the windows outside Kerala to those who are in Kerala. So it is this two-way interaction that I think windows are supposed to perform. As Gandhiji would say, keep the windows open, let the winds blow through, but not blow you away. So while being rooted where we are, we need to keep our windows open. I will repeat what I said yesterday, and I say every time I speak in Kerala, which nowadays is quite often, it being one of the places where people like me would still get invited to talk, which is that it's a pleasure to come to your state that is clean, pollution-free, and has a democratic space where you can discuss freely, debate is still the norm in Kerala. Free speech and discussion, fortunately, is still the norm here. It is a breath of fresh air for me coming from the most polluted city in the world, that is New Delhi, and perhaps, a part of the cow belt where democratic norms are really becoming more and more extinct. I don't have to belabor this point too much. You must have been pummeled with what happened on the 22nd of January, with the coronation virtually of a ruler with divine authority in Ayodhya. The 22nd of January, I want to remind you very poignantly, is the 25th anniversary of the murder of Reverend Graham Staines. And when he was being pushed back into the vehicle, and his two children, which was lit, which they set fire to, and when they tried to run out, they were pushed back by the crowd so that they would get burnt alive. The slogan that was given was, Jai Bajrang Bali. The slogan, Jai Shri Ram, has acquired, unbelievably, the capacity to strike terror in the minds of millions of Indian people, and not only the minorities. You are afraid in my part of the country that somebody will knock at your door and say, Jai Shri Ram, and make whatever demands he or she has to make. Just a day before the 22nd January spectacle, a riot occurred in Mira Bhayandar, you must have read in the newspapers. And the day after the spectacle, the riot occurred because, as has now become very prevalent in the north of the country, a group of people in motorcycles with saffron flags, etc., with shouting provocative slogans would go through a Muslim-dominated area, which creates a response, and you have a bit of a riot situation. And then the bulldozers come in and bulldoze the shops and houses of the minority. This is what happened on the 23rd of January. I'm a historian, so every word I say is footnoted. This is Indian Express, 24th of January. So I'm going to say a lot of provocative things. Each one of it are with sources. Okay? Now, as these shops were being bulldozed, a BJP leader says that after this event of 21st January, what we will do is chun chun ke marenge. We will pick out the people and we'll kill them. Jai Shri Ram. This is all reported in the newspaper. So in the name of Ram, we are going to pick out people and kill. You may recall that when the Babri Masjid was demolished, the slogan was, Babar ke santano ko chun chun ke marenge. That is, we'll pick out all the Muslims and we will kill them. All right? Why am I telling you this story? Because I must urge you, when I come to Kerala, that don't take for granted the freedom that you have here. This Kerala is not India. You have a democratic space, and if you do not occupy it fully, as this institution does, occupy it, expand it to the rest of the country, then this freedom will also disappear. We have seen it happen in institution after institution. I come from JNU, which was the most open university that I can ever imagine anywhere in the world. All opinions were welcome, of all kinds. And I don't think women have been as free in any university in the world as they are in JNU. I don't know whether anybody is there from JNU here. I mean, women can walk around freely, even today, despite Jai Shri Ram, at 1 or 2 o'clock at night, without fear. In that atmosphere, because JNU could not be an island, it has been destroyed, totally. Similarly, I want to emphasize that freedom is not divisible. You can't say, Kashmir is gone, so what, What happened to Kashmir, we will let it pass. And the country did let it pass. That a statehood is just removed one day, turned into a union territory. First you declare president's rule, and then with the governor's support, you declare the state into a union territory. Now this can happen to Manipur, it can happen to Kerala, it can happen to West Bengal. In other words, you need to fight for the other to protect yourself. We need to fight for the minorities to protect ourselves and to protect democracy. It is not only the Jews who suffered in Germany. It's the German people on the whole who suffered because they did not stand up to protect the Jews. Today I speak on the use and abuse of history, and the instances I have given now of Ram and the misuse of Ram, as you will see, are all connected to use and misuse of history. What Ram was in Valmiki Ramayana and what Ram has become in the mouths of RSS activists are totally different phenomenon. The Ram of Tyag, the Ram of righteousness, of humanity, of kindness, the Ram with whose name Mahatma Gandhi dies in his mouth, the last words, is not the same Ram which strikes terror in the minds of people. How has this happened? How is it that we are witnessing the cynical use of history to destroy the very basis of the Indian nation as it was imagined? To destroy, as it was imagined by the Indian national movement, what we call, or what Tagore called, the idea of India. It is, the use of history is now being done to destroy that vision of the idea of India and of the Indian Republic, the democratic Indian Republic. I will try to demonstrate to you how history has been misused in that project. The question that arises is, how has history been put to such destructive use? Now, history has been described by one very eminent historian and philosopher, E.P. Thompson, as the master discipline, the queen of humanities. I mean, it comes as a surprise to most people because normally the last thing they want to do these days, especially young people, is history, because if you're not good in maths, if you're not good in this, if you're not even good enough to do sociology, chalo history kar lo, the last option. And top institutions in the country, schools, are now removing history from their syllabi. The best schools in Delhi do not even offer history. What is this rubbish history? Now, the trouble is, it is the master discipline. When a great philosopher or a great economist makes a breakthrough, he writes history. Marx wrote history. Morris Dobb, the great economist, wrote history. Wallerstein, the great sociologist, wrote history. Why is it the master discipline? Because it incorporates every other discipline under it. Let me give you an example. Many of you would have studied economics. I was also an economics student. I never did history till I reached the master's level, for the same reason that history is so poorly taught, kings, queens, and battles, etc., and dates, that I, like every other child, ran away from it. But what does the discipline of economics do? It says, assuming there is no political disturbance, assuming there is no climate change, assuming, you make 20 assumptions. And then you say that if you increase the input of capital, what would be the impact on labor? No, historian can't say this. You cannot assume anything. The discipline has to deal with psychology, sociology, politics, genetics, the use of genetics in studying in history, the use of climate, study of the climate change, etc., are all parts of history. The more you are able to bring in all aspects of these disciplines into the understanding of history, the greater the historian you are. All right, and since Aditi mentioned contemporary history, I'll just take 1 minute to say what is contemporary history, because it sounds like a contradiction in terms. Contemporary is now and history is at the back. No, contemporary history is not defined by a period. It's not as if modern history ends one day and contemporary history starts. Contemporary history is a methodology of picking a contemporary item and trying to explain it historically, going back as much as is required. Like if somebody came from the Mars and looked at India, the questions that would arise in their minds is, why is India poor? Or how is it that India has still a democracy? Now, the answers to these questions take you back. Like if you're answering the question, why is India poor? You cannot say because, Modi doesn't know economics, which he doesn't, of course. It has to be something more. Because India was not poor when the British came to India at the end of Mughal rule. In the beginning of the 18th century, India produced 8 times the GDP of the United Kingdom. 8 times. It was not poor. It was one of the biggest economies in the world, producing about 25% of the world's GDP. So at least I'll have to go back there and see what is the impact of colonialism. So as a contemporary economist or a contemporary historian, I have to go back 200-300 years. Why is India a democracy? A fine mind like Amartya Sen goes back to ancient India to explain it. He says because we had a dialogical tradition. He compares Sanskrit. Amartya Sen is a scholar of Sanskrit as well. His grandfather was a great scholar of Sanskrit and worked with Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore, in fact, picked him out and insisted that his grandfather stay with him in Shantiniketan when he created Shantiniketan. And he says if you compare Sanskrit with other classical languages like Greek, Latin, etc., you find that there is far more of questioning, far more of debate in Sanskrit than in the other languages. The questioning of God itself, as Jawaharlal Nehru in this absolutely brilliant work, The Discovery of India, demonstrates, and Amartya Sen repeats almost everything that Nehru says in Discovery of India about 70 years later in his major work, The Idea of Justice and the Argumentative Indian, which many of you would have read, where he makes the same argument. He picks from the original Rigvedic hymns onwards, where there is a description of God like this, maybe it is like this, maybe it is like that, or maybe it isn't there. So even the absence is there. So this multiple truths, the possibilities, Buddha talking of 1,000 truths. A disciple goes to Buddha and says, is this the truth? He says, maybe it is, but there are 1,000 other truths. So this tradition is what he goes back to say that is what Indian society was able to build upon to create a democracy in a country in which democracy would seem impossible. The multiplicity of languages, the multiplicity of religions, the divisions, etc. How could it be a democratic country? How could it be even a nation? When nation states emerged in the world, as you know, modern nation state emerged only in the modern period, 17th, 18th century onwards, and they emerged in Europe. That is, empires, the big empires, the Habsburg Empire, the Ottoman Empire broke down, and your England, France, Germany, etc. came up. They came up as one language, one religion states. That's how nation states emerged in the world. Catholic France, not even Christian France. Catholic France, Protestant England, unification of Germany on the basis of one language, German-speaking areas, unification of Italy on the basis of one language, one religion. That is when the Indian people had the genius to imagine a nation which would celebrate diversity. We did not imagine our nation as one language, one religion. We imagined it as a multiplicity of and celebrated diversity. The more, the better. That is why the greatest Malayali poet or the greatest Bengali artist was also the greatest Indian nationalist. There was no contradiction between the two because it was not created. It is the European version of nationalism which is now being appropriated by the RSS and such likes, the majoritarians. That is the foreign version, and saying this is our nationalism. Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan. But that is not Indian nationalism at all. It never was. It's an imported concept which has been pressed down our people's throats. Okay, to come back to the Queen of Humanities, how is it that such a discipline, as I said, the master discipline, is being misused in this manner? How does it happen? The other aspect of history as compared to the other social sciences, and particularly the physical sciences, is that it is always open to change and interpretation. There is no final truth in history that what I say is history. Somebody else will uncover some more data, some other interpretation, and you will have yet another interpretation of history. So there is a openness, necessary openness about history. There is a tentativeness, a proximate nature of the discipline, which has been used by multiple forces, progressive forces the world over. In fact, in ancient and medieval times, all kings would try to legitimize themselves by a particular version of history. This is why I am the king. But in modern times, all movements, whether it's revolutionary movements of any nature, They have all tried to draw from history. And so have movements which are reactionary in nature. So both sides have tried to utilize history. And what you find increasingly happening, particularly in India, but also elsewhere, is not history, not a reinterpretation of history, but a complete falsification. Lies and imagination, myths, mythology suddenly converted into reality, and that is claimed to be history, and that is weaponized to create disorder or create a vision of the future which is very, very dangerous. I'll explain that in a minute. The earliest distortion of history in India happened with the emergence of the discipline itself, the emergence of the modern discipline of history. You see, globally, these modern discipline of economics, history, sociology, psychology, they all happened in the 18th and 19th centuries. The period when Europe dominated the world. So, to use a phrase from psychology, in the birth of these disciplines itself is imprinted a Eurocentric vision. So unless we challenge that, we continue to look at our own past, etc., from a European point of view, which we are doing even till today, unless we contest this, because these disciplines were born in that manner. All right. The British rulers, in order to legitimize their rule, promoted a totally imaginary view of Indian history, where they saw Indian society as permanently divided on the basis of religion. That is, Indian societies only function on the basis of primordial identities of caste and religion. That is why this description of Indian history as Hindu rule, Muslim rule, and British rule was created by whom? By James Mill in the 19th century. Look at the categories: Hindu rule, Muslim rule, and not Christian rule, British rule. The category of nation is okay for the West. But for us, the Bandars, so-called, who needed to be civilized, the civilizing mission, haven't you heard of that? So they were going to civilize this child people, because these child people had this notion of only being Hindu or Muslim. Now this is a version created by them. It did not, that is not what Indian history was. Indian people did not look upon themselves primarily as what their religion was. And they use this in order to create a divide in the Indian people to maintain their empire. This is a standard technique of imperialism globally. You see, all domination cannot be only on the basis of force. You cannot rule a country only on the basis of force. There is something what is called an ideological hegemony also required, the consent of the people in some way. So when the British came to India, initially the ideological basis of British rule was that we are the Mai Baap Sarkar, we will bring you development, we will bring you modernity, we will bring you the railways, this, that, and the other. So we will take you out of this Muslim atrocities and bring India into modernity. That was the thing. Our early nationalists, again something that we don't know because our minds are colonized, the early Indian nationalists were the first in the world to create a comprehensive critique of economic imperialism. The first. Dadabhai Naoroji, Rana Day, etc. Decades before Marx, decades before Rosa Luxemburg, decades before Lenin. But then they were Indian people, so how can Indians do this sort of thing, no? And though there is a 800-page book on this by Bipin Chandra called The Rise and Growth of Economic Nationalism in India, it doesn't penetrate in our minds. It has to come via the West. Then we will begin to say, oh, really? Our guys were that smart in the 19th century. But anyway. But this view was blown to the pieces by the early nationalists. Through their books, through the writings, people like R.C. Dutt, Dadabhai Naroji, Ranade, Gokhale, etc. Much of you would have read Naroji's famous work, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, blew this theory that imperialism, colonialism was leading to development. They were able to argue that the overthrow of colonialism was the only path to development, which is what Marxists later on propagated the world over, right? Now, once this theory is blown and British rule wants to continue in India, what is the basis on which they continue? By the late 19th century, as you know, the world was being divided into colonies because Britain was not the only industrial power. By the late 19th century, several other European powers have also industrialized. They wanted their colonies. There was a struggle for colonies, and the rest of the world, which was not yet colonized, was now colonized, right? There was a scramble for colonies in the late 19th century, and Britain had to keep its older colonies intact because everybody else wanted to come in now. Now, how do you keep it intact? That is the time when the notion of permanent British rule came in. Earlier it was, we will train you into self-government. That was the liberal imperialist ideology. By late 19th century, the ideology pressed was that Indians are permanently unfit to rule themselves. And the reason? Because if we hand over democratic power to the Indians, then the majority will eat up the minority. The Hindus will eat up the Muslims. So we are here to protect the minority. Now this is an argument which has been used since the late 19th century by every imperialist power. Everywhere, including in the first colony, Northern Ireland, in Ireland. In Ireland, that if we leave, then the Catholics will eat up the Protestants. Here, if we leave, the Hindus will eat up the Muslims. Somewhere else, the Zulus will eat up the other tribes. So it is, division of the people has been the ideological basis of the continuation of imperialism or of imposition of imperialism. Entire nation states have disappeared, like Yugoslavia, with Western powers saying that we are going to protect the Serbs, or we are going to protect the Croats, or we are going to protect the Muslims. So in order to protect the part, the slogan being of protecting a part, you destroy the whole itself. All right? Now it is this colonial view of Indian history being divided permanently on the basis of religion, which was taken up by the supporters of colonialism, I say it with a lot of confidence, which were the communal parties. It is not only the Muslim League which was loyalist, so was the Hindu Mahasabha loyalist. The Muslim League and the Hindu Mahasabha joined together to form governments. Shama Prasad Mukherjee was a minister in Fazlul Haq's ministry, because communal parties can join together. I'll have more to say on it if there are questions. And the people who collaborated with colonialism are now masquerading as the nationalists. They are calling themselves Hindu nationalists. Has it ever occurred to you that it's an oxymoron? In a multi-religious country, how can you be Hindu nationalist? What about the others? What about 200 million Muslims? So Hindu nationalist is a phrase which was never used throughout the national liberation struggle, about 100 years of national liberation struggle. They were called communalists. They themselves calls them Hindu nationalists, and as Jawaharlal Nehru repeatedly said, which I mentioned yesterday, that Hindu nationalism is another word for Hindu communalism. In reality, they are anti-national because they break the nation. It's become popular in the West because in the West they do not understand the meaning of communalism the way we use the word communalism. So they started talking of Hindu communalists as Hindu nationalists. And some of the top scholars like Christopher Jeffrelaw, who you read often, also started using it. But I think it's a grave mistake to abandon the nationalist paradigm, the nationalist space, to those who have nothing to do with nationalism. If you heard the Prime Minister's speech at the temple, he said, after 500 years of struggle, finally we have been liberated. The very next day, the Union Cabinet, again all this is newspaper, I can tell you the dates. The very next day, the Union Cabinet passed a resolution, this is 24th or 25th January, saying that in 1947, the body of India got freedom. But the soul of India got freedom only in 2023, 22nd January. So the real freedom has come only now. You must have heard of this starlet called Kangana Ranaut. I haven't seen her, but some people have. Now, Kangana Ranaut was very famously, the young people all smile because they have seen Kangana Ranaut. Kangana Ranaut famously said that India got independence only in 2014, after Modi ji came. 1947, she says, wo to bheek manga tha humne. So in one sweep, from Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, Bhagat Singh, all made into beggars, who achieved nothing. Real achievement came in 2014. Now that date has been pushed further. Real freedom to you has come in 2023. Against what? Because when we were under imperialist control, you were not fighting them. So after we've achieved our freedom, now you are achieving a freedom against whom? Against the medieval Mughal rulers. So this freedom that the Prime Minister is bragging about is freedom from Muslim oppression. In between, the 200 years of actual imperialism has disappeared. This is what you can do to distort history. The colonial communal interpretation repeatedly emphasized the trauma of Hindu-Muslim conflict. I'll give you two examples. It was said, for example, by K.M. Munshi, you have heard the name, he was a major Hindu communal ideologue in 1951. He said the following about the destruction of the Somnath temple. The two examples will be Somnath and Ram Mandir. This is contemporary history to me. If I am not able to explain Somnath and Ram Masjid movement through history, then I'm not writing any history which is meaningful to us. So, what does Munshi say? He says, more than 1,000 years ago, in 1026, the Somnath was destroyed. For 1,000 years, he says, for 1,000 years, Mahmud's destruction of the shrine has been burnt into the collective subconscious of the Hindu race as an unforgettable national disaster. So in 1028, a temple was destroyed and the Hindu psyche has been seared, with this horrible act that was committed. Okay. What is Munshi doing? He's reflecting the colonial perspective created in the 19th century, 900 years later. The earliest mention in historical records of a Hindu trauma caused by the Muslim invasion of 1026 was in 1843 in the British Parliament. Professor Romila Thapar, you've heard of her, was my teacher and colleague for 4 decades. She has written a whole book on the Somnath issue, tracing it from the destruction till how it is used till today. And she shows you, using a multiplicity of sources, what actually happened. She says, destruction of religious places was routinely done across religions and sects, often to loot the wealth of these institutions in ancient and medieval times. The number of Buddhist temples which were destroyed by Brahminical rulers is legion. Or one sect of quote-unquote Hinduism, the word Hindu did not exist at that time, one sect fighting the other and doing destruction was also there. Or Muslim rulers attacking and destroying the other Muslim rulers' religious institutions you have full of those. He says, and the people saw it as that. They did not see it as a Hindu-Muslim divide. And as proof, she says, 150 years after the destruction of the Somnath, one Hindu ruler rebuilt the mosque, rebuilt the temple. So Mahmud destroys it in 1026, 150 years later, one Hindu ruler rebuilds the temple. No mention of Mahmud. No mention of the destruction. It is not an issue. But even more, 250 years later, after the destruction of the temple, a Muslim trader is given permission to build a mosque in the temple premises, in the temple lands, by the local Hindu ruler with the support of the priests and the community. So where is this seared Hindu psyche? It's a construction of a memory which did not exist. Now you tell every child and he'll say, yes, we have been persecuted for 1,000 years. But that was not history, that was not the memory of the Indian people. You are creating a memory in order to create a notion of a trauma, a collective memory of trauma, which you will use for political purposes. The same has been done with the Ram Janamabhoomi issue. Weaponizing a false history. Again, the Prime Minister says, 500 years of struggle. Firstly, let's be clear. Where was Ram born? Who is Ram? Valmiki Ramayana is the oldest Ramayana, right? And when Valmiki wrote that Ramayana, it was treated as a poem, kavya, or Adi Kavya as it's called. It was not treated like the Vedic texts as with religious sanction, not at all. That is why, while you cannot change the Vedic text, the corpus must be the same. Ramayana has been changing over years and years and years. That's why Ramanujam could write about 300 Ramayans. Every part of the country has a different version of the Ramayana because it's a poem. You add on to it. Tulsidas, who wrote the Ramcharitmanas, that is what North Indians think is the Ramayana, which is not what the Tamils or the Malayalis think is Ramayana. But anyway, Tulsidas' Ramayana, which is what is leading to all this. He was there at the time the Babri Masjid was built. And nowhere does Tulsidas say that Ram's birthplace was destroyed. So it is, it is not there. Ayodhya, the current Ayodhya, was earlier called Saket. Only in the 5th century AD, Skandagupta named it Ayodhya so that he could trace his link to Ram, like all kings want to, trace it to Ram and then to the Suryavamshi. You saw this happening on 22nd January. All kings want to link straight with Ram and to, So it is a 5th century Ayodhya. Whereas the epic poems Ayodhya is in Treta Yuga. Treta Yuga is supposed to be thousands of years before the Kali Yuga, which starts 3,000 years ago. So add thousands of years before 3,000, and you know the exact spot where Ram was born, within these 5 square meters. Look at the absurdity of it. The imagination. You don't even know where Ayodhya is. The Ayodhya in Valmiki Ramayana runs along the Ganga. The current Ayodhya runs along the Sarayu River. But you know where Ram was born. So, this whole story about Ram's birthplace, I must share this with you, because you may not know, started in the mid-19th century. It has nothing to do with either the epic or with anything to do with Ram. In the mid-19th century, there was a temple near the Babri Masjid called Hanuman Gadi. You must have heard of the Hanuman Gadi temple, right? Now, the Muslims made a claim that the Bairagis destroyed a mosque to create the Hanuman Gadi temple. And they filed a case. The Mahant of the Hanuman Gadi temple felt that he may lose the case. So he, in order to make a counterclaim, occupied the Chabutra. Chabutra is like a terrace in front of the Babri Masjid, saying that this is where Ram was born. Even then it was not said it is under the masjid. The Chabutra, the Ram Chabutra as it is called, which still exists or existed. So that was the story, that a Mahant, a local Mahant, makes a counterclaim that Ram was born here, which the British in the 1870s gave popularity to. Because Muslims are oppressors, I mean, they have been tyrannical, so they must have destroyed a temple, and they must have destroyed a Ram temple. So it enters the district gazetteers. The 1905 district gazetteer for the first time mentions that all that it says is that there is a local belief that Ram was born here. And nobody took it seriously. Anybody can say that, like if you travel in India, I have at least seen 10 places where a dip is said to be the place where Bhim had put a step, because it was so big and heavy. So every little dip, Bhim came there, I found it in Himachal, I found it in Shillong, and you will find it all over the place. So Ram is also, in Ayodhya even today, there are at least 16 temples where they say Ram was born here. But you actually mobilize. The mobilization to destroy the masjid started only in the 80s, 86, 87. Before that, neither Savarkar, nor Golwalkar, nor Jansangh, nor Hindu Mahasabha, nobody ever mentioned the Ram temple. The Ram temple being there under the masjid comes up only in the 1980s. And you call it a 1,000-year struggle, 500-year struggle. This is what is misuse of history. As opposed to this version of history, where you weaponize conflict, imagined or real. Some of them were real. After all, the Somnath was destroyed, but you weaponize it. And some you imagine, like the Babri Masjid being on a Ram temple. The opposite was the anti-imperialist, nationalist use of history. They put forward a totally different interpretation. They were not trying to create memories of historical trauma in order to create differences in the present. On the contrary, they drew on the reality of Indian society and how it organically dealt with religious, caste, and other differences through new religions like Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. All three were really movements against caste oppression, all right? Or through centuries-long movements like the Bhakti and the Sufi movements, which were also movements to deal with, accommodate religious and caste differences, all right? Now, they draw from that. They focus on the shared tradition in language, music, poetry, painting, architecture, philosophy, and everyday practice, cutting across religion and caste, and talk of the Buddha, Guru Nanak, Kabir, Akbar, Mirabai, Darashiko, Ramanuja, Amir Khusro, etc., contributing to the creation of a composite culture. I'll give you one example. A song written by Amir Khusro, 13th century, and Nehru makes a mention of it. He says, nowhere in the world have I known that a song written 700 years ago is still sung in exactly the same words across all religions by millions of people. You may have heard this, I don't know whether it's popular in the South or not, a small song called, which says, Chhap Tilak Mitai Tose Naina Milaiki. Chhap is a sign you get by doing namaz on your forehead. Tilak is what the Brahmins wear. He says, those disappeared once I met the eyes of God. That is, once I do that, this denominational religious differences disappear. All right. Now, this is sung in Bangladesh today. It is sung in Pakistan. It is sung in India. It is sung by Hindus. It is sung by Muslims. All you have to do is Google Chap Tilak and see how many people are still singing it across religions. 700 years. Now, that is a composite culture. Where you don't ask, who's the greatest master of Kathak? Wajid Ali Shah. You want to do a master's in music? You have to do 2 courses on the contribution of Wajid Ali Shah to musicology and to dance. You want to do Drupad? You cannot but deal with the Dagar brothers. That is the families which have kept up Drupad, which is supposed to be the most ancient of Indian musical forms, has been kept up by Muslims. Now, this was the reality that the nationalists were trying to draw upon. And this was best expressed by Jawaharlal Nehru in the discovery of India. He talks of the emergence of Indian civilization that occurred over the centuries through absorption, assimilation, synthesis of all influences India was exposed to through the JANAL, through trade, through invasion, migration, intermixing, etc. He says from the Indus Valley civilization 5,000 years ago to the Dravidian, Aryan Central Asian, as you are aware, as Tony Joseph's book will have shown you, that all of us have actually Iranian origin. So all this purity of the Indian Hindu race, give it a second thought. He says all this intermix. Aryan, Central Asian, Iranian, Greek, Parthian, Bactrian, and you artists know the influences of all this in art. Scythian, Hun, Arab, Turk, early Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, Afghan, Mughal. Nehru names all these. All these have gone into the making of the composite Indian culture, all leaving their mark. In his beautiful phrase, he says, like some ancient palimpsest. Palimpsest is a manuscript, ancient manuscript written on paper, on which layer upon layer of thought and reverie had been inscribed, and yet no succeeding layer had completely hidden or erased what was written earlier. So impacts occur, they are absorbed, it enhances, does not erase, it doesn't have to destroy anything. It is to this organic process through which the Indian civilization grew. As I mentioned earlier, that what Nehru does in this is exactly what Amartya Sen has done in 2 major books. So it's amazing that Nehru could anticipate this in the 1930s, and that too writing from prison. His discovery of India, handwritten script, is there in what was once called the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. That museum has disappeared. I hope this one survives. There is the iconic Nehru Memorial Museum Library is no more. There is not a historian in the world who writes on Indian history who did not have to use the Nehru Memorial Museum. It's one of the finest collections in the world, right? Is no more. It's now the first time in the world. It's an all prime ministers museum, in which, of course, Nehru is in one corner and Modi ji looms large. So this process of organically emerging, the civilizational process was interrupted by colonialism. Colonialism came to it as a shock. And it not only stopped this dynamic process of negotiating differences, but actually froze the differences and accentuated these differences. If there were any, they accentuated them. The colonial and the religious communal forces have built upon this over the years. Now, the challenge to the colonial communal perspective in the academic sphere came only after independence. The national movement, as I said, history economics was written, the classical economics, for example, was written in the 18th and 19th century, which was Eurocentric. The national movement challenged it. The economics was challenged by nationalist economists like Naroji and R.C. Dutt and others. And it's people like Nehru, Bose, who wrote books, Tilak, Gandhiji. In their political writings, they challenged the colonial historical view. But in academic writing, it did not happen. Because the education service, you would get thrown out if you wrote nationalist history. Many of them were actually thrown out for even trying to do that. You could only write in history textbooks of the colonial period, starting with the phrase, Angrezi Raj ki barkatein, which means the benefits of colonial rule, right? You could not write the decimation of our society under colonial rule. So this happens after independence. And there is a huge amount of scholarship that emerges in India in history, in economics, in sociology. Some of the tallest names that you can think of began to write in this period. From Irfan Habib, Bipin Chandra, Romila Thapar, R.S. Sharma, M.N. Srinivas, Yogendra Singh, just think of any name, B.N. Ganguly, Amartya Sen, Sukhamay Chakravarti, they are all writing in the 60s and 70s. And Indian social sciences emerged as one of the most sophisticated in the world. I want to tell you that story because we are undoing something that we had once achieved. And not only did these breakthroughs in understanding occur, an effort was made to bring it to the ordinary people. As Nehru famously said, that historians, he begged the historians, please do not write for you and your 6 other friends. That is, you write a PhD dissertation which you read, your supervisor reads, 2 examiners read, and then it goes into the archive. So he said, history, unless it reaches the people, has no meaning. History is not just collecting some, artifact or some data without any connection with society. It must be connected. So what these people did was, again a first in the world, the tallest of the Indian academics were persuaded to write for school children. So Romila Thapar wrote class 6 books in ancient history, which many of you would have read. Class 6. And Romila Thapar is an outstanding scholar. She didn't have to, and not for money, it was for a pittance, there was no money paid for this. It was meant to be that our children should have access to top class history. Bipin Chandra wrote for 12, Satish Chandra for 10, like this, that and the other. These texts became globally accepted as standards of how school texts should be. People in England, Germany began to argue, look at what India does. Our school textbooks should not hide, German school textbooks should not say that there was no Holocaust. Or British school textbooks till today do not talk about colonialism as oppressive. They talk of colonialism as leading to modernization. We brought up the rest of the world. Niall Ferguson's book's title is Empire, How the Modern World Was Created. So empire created the modern world. So that is what school children learn there. So they said, look at what India does. But simultaneously as these books were coming up, an alternate strand was also emerging. The communal attack. There was a colonial attack, that is neo-colonial writings came up, which if there are questions, I will tell you how scholars began to emerge saying that colonialism was very good and progressive. Tirthankar Roy, your frizzy hair, what's his name? Meghnad Desai, they all say that colonialism was fantastic. Without that, India would not have reached where they have reached. It is still done. But that's not what I'm focusing on today. I'm focusing on the communal attack. As you know, the RSS was banned after Mahatma Gandhi's murder. 20,000 RSS people were put in jail. And they were released only after they made, as they always do, a false promise that we will not indulge in politics. We are only a cultural organization. You can see how the RSS is a cultural organization. So what if our prime ministers and home ministers and everybody are RSS, but we are a cultural organization, right? So they said, they made a promise that release our people, we will not do any politics, which is what led to the murder of Mahatma. We will do only cultural work, right? Even at that time, Nehru had warned, very precociously. He said the whole mentality of the RSS is a fascist mentality. Therefore, their activities have to be closely watched. You just cannot take their word for it, that we will not do politics. What did the RSS do? From 1951, when they started their first school, the Saraswati Shishu Mandir, as they are called, was started in 1952 with Golwalkar, the RSS chief, inaugurating that school. Today, 92% of the districts of India have an RSS school. Thousands and thousands of them. So they did their quote-unquote cultural work. Now, what is this cultural work? We have written a whole book on it called RSS, School Texts and the Murder of Mahatma Gandhi. What I'll do is I'll give you some extracts from RSS school texts, which were brought out by the NCERT itself, a document produced in the 1990s by the NCERT, which studied the school textbooks all over the country, including the RSS. And this is what they find, that for 10-year-olds or 9-year-olds in class 4, what are they taught? On the rise of Islam. The invaders came with a sword in one hand and the Quran in the other. This is what Islam is, right? Houses of prayer and universities were destroyed. Libraries were burnt. Religious books were destroyed. Mothers and sisters were humiliated. And justice was unknown to them. Who is saying this? Those who demolished the Babri Masjid, vandalized the Bhandarkar Library, one of the greatest libraries that we had in Pune, humiliated mothers and sisters in Gujarat, are saying Muslims are like that, right? So this imagery created in the minds, tender minds, that Islam is dangerous. As Tista Sitalwad wrote, that with this kind of textbooks, a Godra was waiting to happen. You create monsters out of young people because they think by killing a Muslim, you have done a great national act. Jai Shri Ram. What do they tell about Christians? Kerala being a multi-religious society, I love talking about the smaller communities here. It is because of the conspiratorial policies of the followers of this religion, that is Christianity, again from a class 6-7 book, that India was partitioned. So the partition is because of the Christians. Even today, Christian missionaries are engaged in fostering anti-national tendencies in Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal, Bihar, and Kerala, and other regions of our country, because of which there is a grave danger to the integrity of present-day India. So the Muslims and the Christians are a grave danger. In the RSS viewpoint, or the Hindutva viewpoint, in their lexicon, Muslims and Christians are foreigners in India. And why? If you don't know, the theoretician of the RSS is Savarkar. Though he said, I have nothing to do with Savarkar, to do with the RSS once he was indicted for the murder, or at least accused of the murder of Mahatma, but that is a separate story, we can discuss that later. But Savarkar created this notion that Muslims and Hindus or Christians cannot be Indians, because he said their loyalty is questionable because their Punya Bhumi, that is their holy land, is outside India. So you can be a true Indian if your Pitri Bhumi, your fatherland, and your holy land is in India. Now, since their holy lands are in Palestine or in Makkah, how can they be? So they cannot be Indian. So the Indians are only the Hindus, the rest are all foreigners, and they must live as number 2 level citizens or disappear. Now, the absurdity of this doesn't seem to strike us. By this definition, no Christian in the United States, England, Germany, France, South Korea can claim to be British, American, etc. because their holy land is in Palestine. वहाँ के लिए ठीक है, but not for us. This exceptionalism is an example of the colonial mind. Rishi Sunak can be Prime Minister in England and you're very proud there and you want to send everybody, all your kids to England, USA and America. But here, Hindu, Virajman. As the communal forces, so this is what we're taught in the school texts. But then these are only RSS schools. Most kids didn't go to RSS schools at those days. Certainly we did not. In our school days, they hid in the woodwork. Nobody came out and said, I'm a, garv se ko, I'm Hindu. I mean, you were thought to be an idiot if you did anything of that kind. That is not the case anymore. So it was only in these kind of schools. But once, and this is important, once they acquired or came close to state power, they used state power to spread the RSS view into the state machinery. The first time the RSS came close to state power was in 1977. As you know, the Jan Sangh, which is the political wing of the RSS, merged into the Janata Party, which came to power in 1977. The moment they came to power, they said these books written by Romila Thapars and Bipin Chandras and others should be banned. The demand for a ban of these books came in 1977 itself. But then India was a different country at that time. The moment this demand came, all over the country there were protests. Again, look at the newspapers of that time, including in the NCRT itself. The NCRT said, how can we do this? These are our best books. So the effort failed. In any case, the Janata Party disintegrated. The next time they came to power was 1999-2004, part of a coalition. Having come to power again, they again attacked these books. Now they said not a ban, but they said 42 passages must be deleted from these books because they hurt religious sentiments. Like R.S. Sharma, one of India's greatest writers on ancient Indian history, talks about Dalit oppression, slavery-like condition in ancient India. They said you can't have that because it hurts Hindu pride. So this is, like I said, writing the history of Germany without talking about the extermination of the Jews. You cannot talk about that. So something hurts the Rajput sentiment, they said first you have to clear the history textbooks through the religious gurus. Otherwise, you cannot teach them. Dangerous. This not only can you not write history, you cannot do even the sciences. As you know, in the US, they used to fight over this issue that can you teach Darwin theory of evolution, because if you do, then what will happen to Adam, Eve, and the biblical story of the creation of man? And you are, believe you me, you are seeing this in 2023, 2022, from the NCRT textbooks, Darwin and the evolution theory has been removed. Otherwise, how can you say that Karna was born in a matka? I am not saying it. The Prime Minister of the country said, the fact that Karna was not born in his mother's womb proves what? that we had genetic sciences at that time. We could have test tube babies, right? So it's dangerous to academics, it's dangerous to an intelligent mind. This subversion of your intellect to some religious guru who will determine what history you will write. Then, when this attack came, 42 deletions, where do they got these deletions? Just before this demand came for these deletions, the RSS published a book where they made exactly the demand for these 42 deletions, which were then sought to be made. Again, as I said, India was still a different country. There was countrywide protest. We were part of it. We formed a group called the Delhi Historians Group and brought out a booklet which we sold on the streets, where we just collected what thinking people wrote about it. People like Amartya Sen, people like K.R. Narayanan, who was the president, people like Veer Sanghvi, the editor, Dilip Padgaonkar, the top thinkers, intellectuals, who all criticized this, saying that this is not how history should be written. You cannot just make deletions of passages decided by some sant here or there. Now, what was the response? I'm bringing you up to the contemporary period in a minute. The RSS chief, K.S. Sudarshan, branded all these people who were critiquing the deletions, Narayanan, Amartya Sen, and others, as, I'm quoting, anti-national, anti-Hindu Euro-Indians. So this anti-national is not a new phrase, right? This is straight out of Mussolini's book, that anybody who disagrees with the government, and especially the Führer, the emperor of the government, is anti-national. In a democracy, it is the duty of the citizen to critique the government. But we are told that if you do that, you are anti-national. This alarming tendency of intimidating those who did not agree with Hindutva or Hindu communal version of history was evident when a group of self-appointed protectors of Indian nationalism, and generally the self-appointed protectors of nationalism are what are often called the lumpen, the unemployed youth, right? So a group of them landed up at Murli Manohar Joshi's house, who was the education minister at that time, and said, we must arrest Ramila Thapar, R.S. Sharma, Arjun Dev, etc., for writing this anti-national history. And what does the minister say? This is all Hindustan Times and Indian Express, December 2021, because you won't believe me otherwise. He says, these scholars are intellectual terrorists. They are more dangerous than the cross-border terrorists. That is, they are more dangerous than the Pakistani terrorists. Now, this is what fascism does. Create bands of people who will attack the intellectuals, who critique them. Then they lost power. So you have 10 years of reprieve, 2004 to 2014, right? In which you did nothing to combat this. Secular parties, left, right, center, they were all there. You did nothing. So when they come back to power in 2014 and particularly 2019, the story starts all over again. It starts in 2021 with one organization called the Policy Research Center, which the top leaders of the RSS and the BJP inaugurated, and it is run by the national convener of the e-training cell of the BJP. The Policy Center said that there are too many mistakes in the history that is being taught here. We must correct this history. This history is wrong. And immediately after that, the Prime Minister, the Home Minister made statements that, we must write factual history of India. We must rewrite our history. We mustn't write this pseudo-secular history that these people are writing. Okay? And by now you have destroyed the institutions. So the UGC also joins the bandwagon, and they produce a curriculum for BA history. For the first time, the UGC is a fund-giving agency. The UGC is supposed to fund universities, not tell you what you will teach. How can one bureaucrat in the UGC, some secretary of the government of India, know everything about physics, chemistry, history, geography, sab kuch? They know everything. So they started giving out syllabuses. They had tried it earlier and JNU threw it out. They said, not even our vice chancellor can tell us what to teach. Because vice chancellor he knows one subject. Each department will know what they to teach. Syllabus are to be made by people who are teachers of the discipline, not by some bureaucrat. But the UGC did that, and such a syllabus has now been circulated. In that syllabus, Mughal history has been thrown out. Akbar does not exist. You have a history now where a book on contemporary history forgot to mention that Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. So there was a protest. So they added one line. One line saying, the father of the nation was assassinated by Nathuram Godse. Who's he? What thought process did he represent? Nothing of the kind. All right. There is a textbook promoted in Rajasthan under the BJP government. One on modern India, the national movement phase, and one on India after independence. In neither of which Jawaharlal Nehru figures. So 47 years of his life, 30 years fighting the British, 9 years out of that in jail, and 17 years as the first Prime Minister of India, erased. Doesn't exist. All right? You are aware of the 2023, just the recent textbook controversy, what has happened with the NCERT textbooks. They have removed Mughal history, large parts of it. And the reason given was that you need to rationalize the textbooks. The school bag is too heavy for little children. They can't carry such heavy bags. So make them smaller. But how do you make them smaller? By taking the Muslims out of Indian history. And the absurdity of it is that in the book on political science, there was a line which said that in the making of the Constitution of India, people like Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Maulana Azad played a critical role, that they headed various committees. Maulana Azad was dropped. 2 words. It lightened the student's bag. You dropped Maulana Azad. Now this erasure of the other, the demonizing of the other, 2 things are happening. One is erasure, the other is demonizing. When the Mughal period was removed, whatever the NCERT director said, it is to reduce the burden. What did the BJP leader say, Kapil Mishra? He said, thieves, pickpockets, 2-penny road runners are being called emperors. This Akbar, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, etc. should be in the dustbin, not in the pages of history. Again, I'll tell you the newspaper where it is all reported. He says, we should not teach all this. What we should teach is the truth about the Mughals. The loot, the adultery, the atrocities, the relationship they had with their daughters and sisters, hatred for art, literature, architecture, and culture. That should be taught, not the lies that are being taught in the NCERT textbooks. So you demonize a community and you try to erase them. Now, this is a dangerous thing. This is what precedes genocide globally. Genocide Watch, Gregory Stenton, who started the Genocide Watch, He predicted the genocide in Rwanda. And he has now looked on India and he said, if things go as they are, you are looking at one of the greatest genocides in world history. Because you're demonizing and trying to erase millions, 200 million Muslims, 30 million Christians, similar numbers of Sikhs and others. They don't exist in your history. This is what happened in Turkey. The Armenians were erased, demonized, and then a genocide occurs. So it is not a matter of just history textbooks, what is in the textbook or not textbook. One must understand the processes that go along this. Just a couple of examples of the distortions, the denial of our common heritage and culture, particularly the denial of the achievements of the Mughal rule. The Taj Mahal, for example, is said was actually Tejo Mahal, built by a Hindu king. This controversy was started by a maverick called Pushottam Nagesh Oak. We used to read this when we were in, 50 years ago. And everybody said this is a madman, lunatic fringe we called them. But the lunatic fringe has become your mainstream. That is the issue of worry. Christianity, he said, was actually Krishnaniti. So Krishnaniti became Christianity. The Vatican was a Vatica. The Kaaba was actually a shivling. They just made a square out of it. Aren't you reading of the shivling found in the Gyanvapi Mosque? Everything is a shivling. They found it in San Francisco also. Their road dividers are often shaped like that. And they suddenly found a group of people starting and worshipping there. So the San Francisco police had a big problem. They said, no, there's a shivling here. I found the shivling. The Economist reported, this is the London Journal, Hindu nationalists, speakers at public rallies across northern India in recent years have launched bidding wars of threats against Muslims, from mass rape to mass expulsion. Haribhushan Thakur Bachaul, a BJP politician in Bihar, declared that Muslims should be burnt alive, just like effigies of the Hindu demon Ravan. Hindu religious leaders linked with the Hindutva movement, without any fear of state intervention, have repeatedly talked of arming Hindus committing genocide of the Muslims. You must have seen these videos. Women saying, you sharpen your knives, get ready, the war is about to come. And openly, religious leaders saying, जब मुल्ले काटे जाएंगे, राम राम चिल्लाएंगे. What a slogan. That it doesn't create horror in our minds. Do you understand what it means, mulle kaate jayenge? When you cut the Muslims into pieces, they will shout Ram Ram. I think Gregory Stanton is not exaggerating when he's pointing at the future. The relentless process of using traumatic events, real or imagined from history, to weaponize history, to create polarization, is not only an Indian phenomenon. The same thing, for example, was done in Yugoslavia. A 14th century battle in which the Muslim forces had defeated the Serbians, the Christian Serbs, the Muslim Turks had defeated the Christian Serbs, was suddenly revived, and a memory was created of Muslim oppression, which led to you must have all heard of it, this massacre in Srebrenica. 8,000 Muslims were massacred. There is still a museum in Srebrenica, if you go to Bosnia, where they've just put up those 8,000 graves, just to remind you, just as the museum since you guys are so good at museums, the Holocaust Museum in Berlin, is a quiet expression of the horror that humanity can inflict upon itself. Nations are made. They do not exist from thy kingdom comes times. As I said, in Europe there were no nations, they were empires. The Roman Empire, cutting across several nations. We had the Mughal Empire, we had the Mauryan Empire, this empire, that empire. The Indian nation, the modern Indian nation, is a creation. Nations are imagined. They are modern phenomenon. As our early nationalists said, India is a nation in the making. It's a process. You make a nation. If a nation is a process in the making, then the unmaking is also possible. And we have witnessed it. We witnessed the unmaking of Yugoslavia. 8 countries exist there now, or 6, I forget. Dismembered. India was broken up. Pakistan, the new nation, is already 2 nations. So you can undo nations. And I think if we want to survive as a nation, we have to understand it, that unless we resist forces which undo our nation, this will not last. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. We'll take a couple of questions on Q&A, as we're already quite over time, but a couple of questions, and then after that we'll go into our informal chat, as we usually do. So those who want to ask questions, please raise your hands, and one by one we'll come to you with the mic.
Good afternoon, sir. Hey. So my question would be fairly a straightforward question out there. So in the rhetoric that the Prime Minister and the rest of the ministers and their lackeys use is that they're decolonizing India's history by bringing in new practices, new protocols that are deviating from whatever the colonial masters have set up. But in that process, there is also a tendency to look at revivalism. And mostly in this case, it's Hindu revivalism. So how do we bridge or actively negotiate the question of decolonization and this question of revivalism in historical writing?
Thank you very much. As I tried to explain in my talk, they are not decolonizing, they're colonizing our history. The viewpoint they are putting is the viewpoint of the colonial masters. That is what they argued, that India is split on the basis of religion, that they only work on according to their primordial identities, that they cannot be mobilized on secular identities like nation, class, etc., etc. Now this is the colonial view. So they are not decolonizing. How could they decolonize when they were the partners of the colonial masters? They were the chief instruments in the hands of the British to fight Indian nationalism. The Muslim League opposes the demands of the Indian National Congress for democratic representation, saying if you have democratic representation, the Muslims, the Hindus will be in a majority and they'll rule over us. The same argument, in a reverse, is used by the Hindu Mahasabha. So they also became partners. During the Quit India movement, The RSS and the Hindu Mahasabhas said, hold your horses. Do not join the movement. The real war is yet to come. So for them, the real war is fighting Muslims. As I said, rather than fighting imperialism, they're fighting a medieval war. They're fighting the Mughals. So where is the decolonization in this? There is a complete colonization of our minds with poison. Poison which was created in the 19th century. This is not how the Indians looked upon themselves. Not one. Read Vivekanand, read Tilak, read Aurobindo. I'm not even mentioning the left, the Jawaharlal Nehru or EMS or Harkishan Singh Surjit or others, But you read what are supposed to be their icons. There is not an iota of anti-Muslims in them. Not an iota. If Indian history was anti-Muslim, if there was this deep psyche of feeling against the Muslim, the first war of independence, 1857, what happened? What did the Hindu soldiers, Brahmin soldiers, what Pandey, this, that, and the other, what did they do? They marched on to Delhi and went to whom? The Mughal emperor. Bahadur Shah Zafar, and said, you take charge. Now, if there was this anti-Muslim, anti-Mughal feeling among Indians, would they have all of them joined hands to bring a Mughal emperor back against the British? So as I said, this is all imagination created in the last 30, 40 years. Poisoning our minds. They're not decolonizing, they're poisoning our minds.
So you mentioned Professor Romila Thapar and said she was your professor as well. The right wing raises one pertinent, she's the most reviled, if I may use that word, for that group. What they say prominently is that, led by her, historians in India haven't written as much about the glorious things that Hindu kings have done as much as they write about great things that the Mughals have done. As a historian, how do you look at that allegation?
See, only somebody who's never looked at a textbook, never read history can say that. Go to anywhere, pick up any history textbooks. And where does it start with? Vijayanagar Empire, Cholas, Chalukyas, this, that, and the other, Satapatha Brahmanas, and God knows what. It is a lie. It's a complete lie. Read Romila Thapar's book. She hardly comes into the Muslim period, She's written only about ancient India. She's one of the greatest ancient history historians. So this is rubbish. They accuse her because they said that in ancient India, the Brahmins ate beef. That is their real, this thing. No, but that is the fact. You read Vivekanand. Vivekanand says, I can quote you the chapter and verse. Vivekanand says, in ancient India, beef, particularly the veal, was served to guests. Because it was considered the best thing you could do and he says, according to Vivekanand, over time, because pastoral societies need to protect their cattle, a religious taboo was made against it, etc., etc. He gives, I'm not saying that is the historical reason why it happens, but another very brave historian, D.N. Jha, wrote a book on the cow, and she elaborated this in great length. The book was banned in India, but it was published in London and is readily available to anybody who reads. But, this notion of your belief being final. For example, you won't believe it. In Chhattisgarh, they said on 22nd January, all meat shops will be closed. It's a primarily tribal area where everybody eats every kind of meat. They don't even understand that being a Brahmin, I'm a Bengali, and my ancestors were Brahmin. I'm not religious, but a Bengali Brahmin, if he is vegetarian, he eats fish thrice a day, and if he's non-vegetarian, then he eats every meat. So does a Kashmiri Brahmin. So am I to generalize that this is what Brahminism is all about? Because the Malayali Brahmin, the Nambudri, or the Tamil Brahmin doesn't do so? This is a vast country. As I said, 300 Ramayans, there are multiple cultures, and our ability to live with it. So, but this accusation that we do not talk about the South and about ancient Hindu kings is complete rubbish because they've never read a book. When politicians become historians, you see, when the governor of Bengal says Arjuna had a nuclear tipped arrow, and he gets promoted for saying so. He becomes vice president of your country. And when your prime minister, they are telling you what history is, right? So what does poor Ramila Thapa, where does she stand a chance? Thank God that they haven't become artists. Then you will have to have their paintings in your museum.
Hello, sir. My question is a little bit more practical. I think most of us here grew up reading the NCERT books that you mentioned. However, the courses are completely revised now in schools. And my question is that, are any of those books that were predominantly written by Romila Thapar in the time, are they available anywhere? Are they still in publication? If so, how do we get our hands on it?
What a lovely question. They banned the books and private publishers begged them, please give it to us. So they sell and they mint money out of these books now. All of these books, Ramila Thapar, Bipin Chandra, Satish Chandra's books have been published, most of them by Orient Black Swan, readily available, read by teachers even now, because to teach you have to read history, no? You can't read Ramayana to teach history. So, people are still using it. You can easily get those books.
Anupa, it's available on Azim Premji has a school textbooks archive. Because when Sir just mentioned it, I Googled and found that you can download it for free on the Azim Premji University archive.
Unfortunately, all that we write gets downloaded for free. So we don't get the royalty, but we are quite happy. So long as the idea is it should reach people, not that we make money.
Any more questions?
Of late, there seems to be a lot of messaging that the citizen doesn't have any rights, he has only duties. What do you think about that?
A lot of messaging?
About a citizen not having any rights, he has only duties to the country.
Oh, absolutely. Kartavya path. You rename something completely saying that you're decolonizing. The decolonization had already happened. The Rajpath was earlier Kingsway. There was Kingsway and Queensway, if you're familiar with Delhi, which became Rajpath and Janpath. So now he's renamed it as Kartavya Path because, as you said, it's all our duties, duty to be dutiful, to be obedient, to listen to the Savior, to hear the Man Ki Baat. You are not supposed to have your Man Ki Baat. People should not have any representation, no? So you're right. The citizen, this is what fascism does. Takes away the citizen's right to be a citizen, the right to differ.
Okay. Since you have been immersed in history and you have been in this line of following whatever has happened for so many, many years, where do you think India will finally go? Do you think that we will be able to get back to our secularism? And what is your opinion about it, your personal opinion, what is it?
See, I wish I was an astrologer. I'm a historian. But still, on the basis of whatever one has learned from history, that long-term changes cannot be done so quickly. You cannot just change a civilization by governmental power. The reason why the current state, look, they believe in Hindu Rashtra. They had been arguing from the rooftops, Hindu Rashtra, Hindu Rashtra. They've acquired first some provinces, UP, Bihar, etc. Now they have power in the center. Not only do they have power in the center, they have absolute power in the majority in the parliament. But are we a Hindu Rashtra? Am I not, and are you not talking a different language? So it is not so easy. The state is not just government. State is the government, the state apparatuses, the police, the judiciary, the education system, the media, and civil society. All of this combined makes a state, right? Now, they find that they have government power, but they don't have control over the rest. Therefore, the effort to penetrate the judiciary, penetrate the police successfully. Police they have done in large parts of the country very successfully. You talk to a North Indian policeman and he just throws out venom against Muslims. So they've done it. Judiciary you can see. Judiciary is absconded, suddenly. Nobody killed Rebecca, you know that, no? Judiciary says that the masjid was demolished and it was a criminal act. Clear terms, it was a criminal act to demolish the Babri Masjid. But who demolished it? We don't know. Every child has seen the videos of all the leaders standing there and saying, "Ek dhakka aur de." But nobody demolished it. So judiciary is gone, almost. No, almost, because there are still judges who stand up, who have a spine. And the education system is resisting, but they're trying to kill it. They like they tried to almost kill JNU. They started like Hitler did. Hitler started with Frankfurt University. And it's been written about in great detail by the management guru, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was in Frankfurt, a teacher there, thrown out. Just as our students are arrested, put in jail for years for no reason, except that they are Muslim. Umar Khalid and 3-4 others were got together on false charges. Others were let out on bail, but not Umar Khalid. Neither Sharjeel Islam, both my students. I didn't agree with them. We have a lot of differences, a lot of quarrels in our classes, etc. But I would defend their right to be different with my life. So I think I've answered your question.
That's not the point. What I was asking is that, okay, all of us really know that the media is gone, the judiciary is half gone, and so also lots of other institutions are kind of being converted. Do you think that the civil society of India has the...
You're right. I got lost in my own... I didn't answer your question fully. I believe that still a resistance will emerge, mainly from civil society. It has emerged. It's that the media doesn't talk about it. We did have the farmers' movement for 1 year, standing right outside the Delhi borders and cocking a snook at them till the government withdrew. This all-powerful Führer had to withdraw and say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." The CAA movement, I was in Kerala at that time. I've seen, I think I was in Cochin, I saw processions led by women, many of them in their dresses which Modi ji says identifies your religion. Kapde se pehchante hain. So there were these kapde se pehchanne wale women protesting against the CAA on the streets. So it was an all-India phenomenon. They killed it, and the corona helped killing that. But it doesn't mean that the spirit of resistance in India has died. The reason I have hope is that this civilization has survived many such attacks on it. This is probably the most serious attack on its civilizational values, not just change of government on top. This is a change, this is an attempt to change its civilizational value. It is not going to be that easy. People will resist. But as I said, again, Nehru predicted this, that following the majoritarian Hindu path, he said the Indian version of fascism is going to be majoritarian communalism. And he said, following this will lead us to the path that Hitler and Europe took, and the denouement of what happened. But he said, at what cost? In other words, we will overthrow. But at what cost? How many generations? How many of our children will have died for this? That is the worry. But certainly, I don't think it's going to be just handed over to the current regime. But that's where I started with. That is why spaces where resistance exists, like in Kerala, like in Tamil Nadu, like in West Bengal, these must strengthen themselves. And the other lesson from fascism must be learned. that when you are faced with a fascist threat, you have to combine. The differences of the right and left have to disappear. Because it is no longer a fight between right and left. It is a fight between civilization, and barbarity, right? So everybody needs to come together. There is a move towards coming together, but as you can read in the papers, it's probably the lesson hasn't yet hit home that not only you will lose, but everybody will lose.
Yeah, we can do one more, last one, and then we'll just wind.
The 22nd January phenomenon had seen a protest of people putting up the preamble to put their cause. And you saw that the original version of the preamble, minus socialist and secular, as it was in 1950, was put up. Do you see that this would really result in those two terms being dropped once they come back into power?
You see, neither the word secular nor the word socialist are really important for the Constitution. Because the Constitution, if you read it, incorporates that. The people of India, irrespective of caste, creed, language, religion, gender, will have equal rights. That's all you need. So it is, the worrisome thing is not that they will remove socialist and secular. The worrisome thing is that they will remove the Constitution itself. I'm not fooling. The Prime Minister said in the first page on this speech, here is speech, first page of the Constitution, there is Ram. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that version. What I suspect is that there was a version that was written, on which there were paintings done by some of our tallest artists. You please look into it. And probably, in one of the paintings, Ram is also there, But, that Ram and this Ram, the Ram of the imagination of our tallest painters is not what they have in mind. The fear is the undermining of the Constitution itself. And they're moving in that direction, as you can see. The laws that are coming in. What is this law, this unlawful UAPA? Under which you can't even appeal to the court. I suspect you are a terrorist, so I can put you in jail. And that's finish, end of the matter. So, this whole change of the Criminal Procedure Code is aimed at giving more and more powers to the executive. The election commissioner, chief election commissioner will now be decided by a majority of the Prime Minister and a cabinet member. The Chief Justice will not even be there. So step by step, bit by bit, I think the Constitution is being undermined. And we have to fight back with the Constitution. That is why the CAA movement, also, you would have found, what were the posters in their hands? I saw it in Jamia, where I think the most powerful resistance was put up by women. It's very interesting. In Pakistan, hard military dictatorship, all the democracy movement was led by women. And here also, when they hit hard, it's the women, ordinary, often uneducated women of that area, Jamia Nagar, who came out and protested, And what did they have in their hands? The Constitution, Gandhiji's photograph, Bhagat Singh's photo, Ambedkar's photo, So they are also part of our history. We should be able to derive from them. If they are deriving from a distorted vision of Ram, who goes around being masculine and a bow and arrow, I'm sure we have other people to draw from. We have Chaitanya, even from religion, Our religion is full of people who are not what they want us to be.
Okay, I think we'll we were going to end on an optimistic note with the second last question, and then we went back a little bit. but it is true, and of many of the discussions I've had, even with academics especially, because they're concerned with what is education today and what is being taught in schools today, that if the children don't know, then how will they know to protest? And that's one of the things that I feel in my fourth decade on this planet, I'm fifth decade on this planet, I would think, if we don't know the language of protest, how do you resist? So that question is actually very important, and today there's so many more demands on your time. Trivial or serious, or like we were saying, young people, what do they know and what do they respond to? So this is actually a very important question, and I'm glad that you covered the textbook for almost 50% of your talk, for how are we looking at what's in the textbooks for schools. And the founder of the museum, in fact, said that knowledge of the arts and understanding of the arts is what will shape better citizens. And you've also touched upon that once more in your speech today. So thank you very much for coming down to... Yes, you sure.
Did I want to end on a pessimistic note?
Yeah.
Again to the second last question. Why we will survive. You see, when people tell us, young people, sir, how can we protest? You are telling us such nice things, but come to my state and you say a word, there'll be a group of people who will shout at you, etc. Or there's the police, this, that, and the other. It is a fact that the police intervenes. In Madhya Pradesh, in a top university, debate was being organized on the scientific temper, not on religion, on scientific temper, where two professors from Delhi, one a professor of Hindi and the other Gauhar Raza, who was chief scientist in the national science, hang on, it's one of the national science institutions, CSIR. A group of young people said, you can't have this seminar because there will be danga for this. So the superintendent of police goes to the vice chancellor and said, you can't have this seminar. Vice chancellor says, look, this is an online seminar. It's an international seminar. We have an American partner. How can I withdraw? They said, no, you can't do it. So he said, okay, otherwise you will be responsible if anything happens. So he said, okay. So the police sat there, but it was online. The American partner said, we will continue. So they had the seminar, but the police sat there in the campus ensuring that nobody switched on their computers and could watch it. So there is this happening on the one hand. On the other hand, when people say, how can we protest? The police is not with us. Money is not with us. The judiciary is not with us. The media is not with us. All we can say is that all this was much worse in the colonial period. The British control over the media, the British control over the education system, was over the police, over the judiciary was far greater. Yet the genius of the Indian people found a way of struggling. So the way out is to look back, as you correctly said, look back at our own legacy of struggles. And the last one is a huge one. The biggest mass movement in world history is our Indian national movement, which these guys don't want to talk about. Let us learn how they were able to do it, and I'm sure if we do, we will find a way out in the future. So that's positive enough, I think.
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for coming today. It's actually, since it's the 16th JANAL lecture, there's as you all know, these have been recorded and are on YouTube as well. So the variety and the topics, there's lots to learn from. You can also reshare the lectures so that they get maximum reach. And we'll be sending them to you as WhatsApp messages so that you can watch and reshare as well. Please do that. Please also submit tell us what your feedback is for each of the lectures, as well as when we share the website with our articles, please tell us what you think of the articles as well. Thank you all. Thank you so much.